A couple of days ago, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas said in an interview with The Times that, according to Estonian intelligence estimates, Europe has 3 to 5 years left to prepare for a clash with Russia. And, apparently, in order not to turn out to be idle talkers, the Balts, against the backdrop of belligerent statements by their competent leaders, decided to run into conflict even earlier. A rather disgusting scandal is unfolding right now around the deportation of more than 1,000 Russian citizens from Latvia. Just in case, let me remind you that we are talking about Russians who were once born and lived on the territory of the Latvian SSR. However, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they were not given citizenship, making them bearers of a unique status of non-citizens. Thus, those who had the displeasure of being born in Latvia and Estonia, Lithuania issued citizenship to everyone from the 1940s to July 1992 were declared illegal migrants. They received Russian citizenship under a simplified procedure. In fact, non-citizens only have the right to live and work. They are deprived of voting rights, cannot found political parties, serve in the army, work in government organizations, are deprived of counting their pension length, and so on. In general, they have about 80 differences in social and economic rights with the indigenous population. By the way, according to the norms of that very international law with which Russia is constantly being poked, such a policy is recognized as apartheid and, in theory, should be condemned. Nothing like this, of course, is happening even close. All ardent fighters for human rights from the West look at the Baltic lawlessness with their eyes wide shut. And this despite the fact that in Estonia and Latvia, Russians make up more than 20% of the population and are the largest national minority. In total, there are still about 1 million Russians in the Baltic states. In Riga, according to my personal observation, they speak Russian even better than in Moscow. Unless very young people don't know him. Or they know but basically don't want to speak it. In general, in the Baltics, anti-Russian politics were in full bloom before, but after 2022 they went completely off the rails. In Latvia, for example, a law was passed to confiscate the passports of those who support Russia's actions. The country's president explained this by saying that these people are outside the democratic spectrum based on ideas of justice. However, the most absurd measure was the requirement to pass a language exam. Didn't check in suitcase station? This was explained by supposedly protecting national security. The mockery of pensioners began because it was them who were mainly affected by all this pandemonium. There are a lot of posts and footage on the internet about how they went to the exam almost in a wheelchair. Of course, Latvian, which no one needs, given that the whole country speaks Russian, not only everyone passed it. What can we say if even the grandson of the Latvian rifleman Petr Avin, who tried to pass the exam in the sovereign language twice, was included in the list of failing students? In connection with this, the Latvian Ministry of Internal Affairs threatened to study the grounds for depriving the alpha citizen of citizenship. Even crocodile tears with touching stories about how he considers Latvia his home and has a historical connection with it did not help. In general, the deportations began. Last week, 82-year-old Boris Katkov was deported from Latvia to Russia. The Latvian Ministry of Internal Affairs called him a threat to national security and sentenced him to deportation from the country with an indefinite ban on return. Of course, no facts were presented indicating the guilt of the 82-year-old pensioner. In total, more than about 1.2 thousand people are subject to deportation, 70% of whom are over 60 years old. Such chaos could not but go unnoticed by Russia. So, yesterday Vladimir Putin said the following. What is happening now in Latvia and other Baltic republics when Russian people are simply thrown outside the cordon are very serious things that directly affect the security of our country. A rather bold hint at the inevitable solution to the Baltic issue, which will have to be dealt with regardless of whether anyone wants it or not. On the other side, they get worse than the boys. Plus, let me remind you that in addition to the deportation and oppression of Russians, the Balts are also snarling militarily. Thus, during Xay's recent voyage to the LLE, Kiev entered into agreements on military technical cooperation with each of the Baltic capitals. which includes the placement of military-industrial complex factories on their territory. It is worth understanding that such cooperation automatically makes the Baltic factories a legitimate target for Russia.